So again, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Joe Cotton, and I'm one of the coordinators for Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition. Today we are going to be featuring someone with whom I have had the honor of working with for a long time. He has been essentially served as our Archdiocesan reentry minister, our designated reentry guy here in the Archdiocese of Seattle. However, he has played this role via an organization that he founded that has grown, and it's a reentry network. It is a collection of multiple reentry partners that work together to kind of create a unified team, if you will, of people that provide a whole slew of different reentry resources. So the network is called the Community Partnership for Transition Solutions. A network exists for several different counties. So multiple counties here in Washington State have this network. And here it's Joe, there you are. So multiple counties have their own network. Now each network might include everything from people who provide housing to returning citizens, people who provide education opportunities to returning citizens, people who help them deal with child support issues, people who help with employment, getting people employment resources, you name it. All of the things that a person returning from prison might need to get reestablished, the network that Joe has put together brings them all to the table together, and it kind of produces a menu of options that someone coming out can be connected to the network, and depending on what they want to do and what they need, CPTS, the partnership, the network, has a resource for that. And it's all connected. And Joe has been amazing in terms of working very closely with our Archdiocesan Criminal Justice Ministry so that any returning citizens that are connected to the church that need resources and support is first, but then Mr. Joe Garcia is my go-to guy that I then connect them with. So Joe, you're here. I would love to introduce you. Again, this is Mr. Joseph Garcia with Community Partnership for Transition Solutions. And sorry for the hiccup in getting you in, but thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you. And no matter where you're at in this beautiful country of ours, good morning and thank you for the invite. It's been my honor to and pleasure, if you will, because as you all are aware, this is a special calling. When we work in prison ministry, prison and jail ministries, we all know it's not the easiest work, but it's also a special calling, and that's why we're engaged in what we do. I'm entering my 52nd year in this body of work, and I've cherished each day, recognizing every day, especially since March 9th here in Seattle, when we went and accepted that the pandemic was real, valid, scientifically proved, that we had to adapt. And we have been adapting since then, like all of us. And but the ministry continues. Even through COVID, it's given us the opportunity to adapt, redefine normal, and get back to work. And so here in the state of Washington, in King County, the city of Seattle, the Archdiocese of Greater Seattle, Western Washington, we have rebranded what used to be just a typical outreach effort into what we call InReach. And so our InReach COVID-19 adapted model is that we now have to figure out with the people that are referred to us, who come to us in their transition from prison and jail, how to connect. And that how to connect we have discovered a number of modalities that we were typically not using before. So again, COVID-19 has now given us some serious challenges in this country. And we can never forget the hundreds of thousands of men and women and children who have passed away, not only in this country, but the millions around the world. That even with that incredible, heartfelt loss of people's lives and the hard work of many providers around us, that we need to figure out how do we sustain our relationship building with the men and women on not only on the inside that are now being prepared to be released to the outside. And in the state of Washington, the governor in April and May basically directed the Washington State Department of Corrections, and a number of counties followed the CDC and public health recommendations that we all know that that the virus, if it's contained within closed areas that are heavily populated, it's going to spread and it's going to really hurt a lot of people. So the governor in our state began directing the State Department of Corrections to begin identifying men and women who are low risk folks that could be tested and then released in what we call, well, it was dubbed as rapid early release. And that went on from April, May, June, July, August, and September. And so, and they were identified not only by risk, but also by county of origin, which means what county did they commit the offense, and then we could release them to those counties. However, you can imagine that many of the counties in this country were either prepared or ill prepared pre-COVID, but definitely during the pandemic, they weren't prepared to receive these hundreds of men and women that were being released from state correctional centers around the country and in our state. So what we needed to do with our Washington State Department of Corrections, and they called us, they said, one, you have a network. You have a network not only in King County, but you have 8 regional networks throughout the state, community partnerships for transition solutions. But you also have a ministry. The Catholic Church in this state has been working, like many of you, for decades on prison and jail ministry. So you already have in place folks that already have the compassion, who already have the likeness, the relationship at the local parish levels with St. Vincent de Paul's, with Catholic Community Service, and of course, the Archdiocese of Seattle has had a prison jail ministry for at least 4 or 5 decades, to the best of my knowledge. So they asked us, the state of Washington asked us, can you prepare a pipeline that can, once they're been identified for release, can you begin meeting them at the gate or having a receiving group in your community that begin to assist them with clothing, with appropriate PPEs, masks, gloves, also the educational process around social distancing, appropriate housing, again, being retested again for COVID to make sure that if they're going to go into a public housing unit or a work release unit or a housing unit that houses specifically men and women who are currently under supervision in the community, that the contagion wouldn't spread. And then we began to work with them locally to provide them the supports, the transition solutions to create stability. And we all know that can take hundreds of hours. It takes a village, without a doubt, of a number of different partners, housing, treatment, second chance employers, It also takes transportation. In the early days of COVID, our public transportation system basically had to readapt. Schedules changed. It just created a lot of different kinds of challenges for transportation. So we had to figure that out. Then once we got to September and dealt with hundreds of releasees, the governor pulled back on the rapid release, and those months that preceded from March through September, we assisted the governor and the Washington State Department of Corrections in redesigning what now is called the graduated reentry process, where now that the populations have been lowered in correctional centers and also the work release centers, we have 17 work release centers around the state. They have been capped at 55% occupancy, again, in response to CDC guidelines and county public health requirements. And then we began to work out a much coordinated local response in how we began to really complete the transition. Of course, now with vaccinations increasing and this new normal becoming a regular daily practice for all of us who really believe in the science and the facts, the population we're working now with through local parishes, through the reentry ministry, and our partners, not only St. Vincent de Paul partners, but our Catholic Community Service partners. And in this state, CCS is the largest housing provider for low income and at-risk populations. And so, and then you add to that partnership platform, the existing housing providers. We have grown now to, and rapidly growing every day, to 427 second chance employers in King County that are prepared to rehire and hire our releasees. And of course, 50 to 60% of the men and women who are being released from state correctional centers have had a long history of trauma, PTSD, addiction. So we're dealing with a large population. In some cases, are not prepared to go to work right away. So the continued support to provide stability is in place. But for those who can go to work or go back to school to complete their GED, their high school 21 requirements, go into a short-term professional technical certification at the community college. We have an excellent partnership at South Seattle College and have for 24 plus years. And I've been employed as a part-time faculty, senior faculty member, and in charge of our Justice Involved Solutions unit in our academic programs at South Seattle College. So again, the partnership at the local level, at the county level, and now at the state level with our regional network has been very effective. So I'm going to stop right now. I think it's really important for us to engage and take your questions, and Joe and I are prepared for that.
So Joe, someone popped into the chat. Do you have reentry mentors? And if so, could you talk a bit about how your mentorship program works?
Right. Okay. So forgive me, people. I'm kind of a wonk when it comes to this body of work. I've been in my force so long that I just read continually the research, the fact, the pilots that are working, proven and tested, evidence-based efforts. We know that mentorships work effectively for character building age group populations. That's usually from 12 to 16. If that individual doesn't have effective intervention in those early years with the right character building organizations and mentors that are trained for working with this population. Because again, this younger population, there still has some relationship with families. There's still some relationships with the educational system. And of course, what isn't connected very well with families and the school systems is the community partners that are essential for successful intervention for this younger age population. That's the mental health and addiction services, the behavioral health partners. So again, mentorships work extremely well. The research bears that out. It's not very effective for adults, especially the adults who this early intervention did not work very well. So again, we know that half of this younger population will move at the age of 18 into the adult system. The other thing that takes place is that over 60% of the younger population leaves school by the 9th or 10th grade. So here they go into an adult system that one is not prepared to work with them because again, the adult correctional system in America is built for adults, not kids. But then again, by law, at least in this state, when you turn 18, you're going to move from a juvenile correctional facility, or what they called rehabilitation centers, into the adult correctional centers. And then they enter as youngsters with all these adults, and very ill prepared socially, educationally, and functionally. And so what we have is a real growing intense situation that creates more stress, more anxiety, more trauma, and they leave the adult correctional system with, and most of them, if they're assessed and diagnosed, with PTSD. Now, also realize that, remember, half of this population, up to 60%, when they were young, were never diagnosed with their learning challenges, what is referred to as learning disabilities, and some of them even more profound educational and learning challenges. So again, they leave the adult system basically not prepared for transition back to the community. So this is where we need peer advisors. We need to identify men and women who have successfully transitioned, not only maintained their sobriety, but are fully re-entered into the community, back with their families, back to work. Many of them went back to college, got professional degrees, AA degrees, bachelor degrees, and are doing well. And so we've been able to identify those adults and train them as peer advisors. And we've done that. And this is something that the Archdiocese really needs to take a lot more credit for. And that is, they basically have sponsored these adults for the past 9 or 10 years through a number of consultations, retreats, gatherings, and now the Reentry Corps, CORPS, is a self-existing, self-identified group of peer advisors, their own private nonprofit, an extension of our King County CPTS network, very much connected with the Archdiocese reentry ministry. And now they recently had their own statewide summit on April 4th, and now they're going to organize themselves as a statewide leadership group of formerly incarcerated adults. So it takes time to build the relationship, the trust, the competency, but also first the confidence, the self-efficacy skill sets that are necessary for all of us to be productive and effective, not only as an individual mom or dad, brother and sister, a father and mother, uncle and aunt, but a member of a community. And so we've been very effective in that transition process to complete the reentry outcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
I think you already kind of spoke to this. There was a question around in your experience why mentorship doesn't work, but you kind of spoke to that in terms of the pivot that the network has made away from mentorships and towards peer advisors, and seeing a little better result from that. There was another question around how does this dovetail with restorative justice, and maybe as you're talking about that, about how this dovetails into restorative justice, I'm curious too about just if you could speak to how CPTS came together in the beginning, what the needs were, how it evolved, and what it is today, and then how that dovetails with restorative justice.
Let me tie two of them together. Historically, in 1999, at the tail end of the Clinton administration, ironically or not ironically, one of Hillary Clinton's prime projects as First Lady was she really wanted to figure out with the Department of Justice and governors around the country, how can we build a restorative justice process for adults who are incarcerated. So what they did in late 1999 was they launched a national initiative, and when George Bush became president in year 2000, fortunately, because of his faith-based belief in second chance, he thought that was a great idea. So he kept that movement rolling in the Department of Justice under his administration, and so they launched what they call in late 1999 into 2000 a 6-year initiative called the Going Home Project, and you can Google that up. It's an interesting project that lasted 6 years. The president offered each governor of the 50 states a $1 million grant. Here's $1 million. You got 5 years to figure it out on this restorative justice, this going home process from the inside out. How do you put together a local network, sponsors, if you will, the welcome wagon idea? How do you construct community partners to be part of the solution? How do you bring stakeholders together who have never worked together, but in their linear way of a daily work, they all do this body of work, but never together. And so in the first year, in year 2000, the grant went to the governor of this state, and then the governor gave the Department of Corrections the task to bring stakeholders together from around the state, and that lasted about 6 months in 2000. And then in late 2006, the stakeholder group made a recommendation to the governor that they like to target 3 counties in the state of Washington to pilot for 5 years this going home project. And that it was a restorative justice effort. And that is, as we're all aware, in restorative justice, you need to really organize a welcome wagon community group of men and women who will sit with the individual upon their release to work through, if you will, a verbal or written contract of how you will be welcomed back and how you earn your way back as a community member, and how a community network becomes responsible with the state or the county for that individual. But a lot of that is on the shoulders of the individual who needs to restore himself with that community again. And so the 3 counties that were selected were Spokane County, Pierce County, and King County. And so we were asked in 2000 to co-chair and bring together these stakeholders in King County. And so are the other two counties to do the same. Long story short, we built that process, and the target population to be served were 18 to 34-year-olds. And so they were identified pre-release to be welcomed back to the community. And this network, this King County Going Home network, would then receive that person and assist them in welcoming them back to the community, supporting them back into the community, and walking and working with that individual in the community. And so we had a number of stakeholders from a number of faith-based communities, including the Archdiocese of Seattle and including several parishes, with evangelicals, Methodists, Presbyterians, Unitarians, Buddhists, Baptists, etc. And oh yeah, the Jewish community was also involved with us. And so all that said, 5 years we worked with several hundred people. Again, the restorative justice process dictates a lot of work. You got to get your hands dirty every day. At the end of the day, you can wash them, but you're going to definitely get in there and work it, because it's a very arduous commitment that you make in a restorative justice process. So at the end of 5 years, in August 2006, the Department of Justice asked the governors and the 3 counties in the state of Washington, okay, we're going to bring you together. You're going to share for a 2-day retreat, what's worked, what hasn't worked, because in 6 months, on December 31st, 2006, it's over. The grant's over. Okay. You got a choice to make. You either start folding your tent, thank you very much, or you bring together the original stakeholders, the stakeholders that have continued in this 5-year pilot. And we would recommend that you hold a number of focus groups to report back to your community. Again, what's worked, what hasn't worked, bring back folks that have been part of this process of restorative justice, individuals that you've worked with, so they can share their story, their process, what worked, what didn't work well for them, and then build a sustainability plan. Because come December 31st, 2006, there's no more money, except we're going to spend a year with a contractor to evaluate your work in all 50 states. So that evaluation is also available on if you Google up the Department of Justice Going Home project. Okay, so of the 3 counties, King County was the only one that chose to build a sustainability plan. And we held something like 20, 25 focus groups between September and right before Thanksgiving of that year. And then in late November, early December, the stakeholders came together with the sustainability plan that was built. And it was built with significant feedback and engagement of the folks that we served, the community partners that stayed with the process, and other stakeholders who became interested through the focus group process. And so in late December, right before Christmas 2006, we launched and agreed to the sustainability and branded the King County Community Partnership for Transition Solutions. And now we've been at work since January 2007 in this county, I guess going on what? I forget now, 12 years, 14 years. But we also have 8, and we have 8 CPTSs around the state, regional ones. And we have a brand new one, which is a tribal government one that includes the lower and upper Potlatch tribes in Western Washington, led by the Port Gamble tribal government. So again, that's what we've been involved in. That's the process.
And just to give a little context to this, I just want to toss in a little bit of a case study just to give you a sense of how the CPTS network works, kind of as it trickles down. So I have a client that I have known for many, many years. I was actually his group home counselor when he was 16 years old. And I was young myself. I was probably 20 years old, working in a group home, and this young man has stayed connected with me all these years. He's in his late 30s now, and he just finished a stint of incarceration. He had been kind of in and out for many years, but this last run, he was down for about 3 years, and he was going to be returning to the community. Having the connection with me, he approached me asking for assistance in his reentry journey. So, of course, I reach out to my guy, to Joe Garcia and the CPTS network. And so in connecting Brandon is his name to Joe has team members that work with him, and so he kind of assembles a little team that is the go-to team on behalf of CPTS. That Brandon, that's now his team, that he can, and we're all communicating together now. By virtue of Brandon being connected to Joe and that team, he now has access to all of the stakeholders, to all of those reentry partners that Joe has called together. And has formed into this singular group. So now it's a matter of entering into dialogue with Brandon about what his particular dreams, hopes, plans are, and what are his needs. Brandon is able to sort of identify those things for himself. He identified several things. One is he needed some assistance finding a place to live, because he needed to produce that address that is needed for him to get released. And he went to work release and then was released from work release, but he needed that address. So he needed help finding that address. He has 2 daughters, and so he needed help figuring out child support and an amount that he could manage, and getting that all figured out with the child support people. He had some issues with wanting to become relicensed because the kind of work he hoped to get into involved needing a driver's license, but because of the past, that had been revoked, and some other needs in there. So anyway, as Brandon articulates these needs, that team through CPTS that he's communicating with, again, we're able to go to the stakeholders and say, all right, well, we've got someone that from the network that can kind of take on the relicensing issues, and that's their area of expertise. So we're going to connect you with this person that's going to help you with relicensing. Here's a person that we're going to connect you with from the network that can get you, second chance housing, that's going to help you get that address that you need, which he was able to secure. He had his address. He released from the reentry. The work release, and then had a place, a kind of like a shared living house for folks coming out that he got into, again, through connection to the network. And then we had someone in the network that is connected to the child support office. And so he was able to be connected to that person who helped him put together his petition to lower the amount to an amount that he could manage while he was getting back on his feet, but still be able to step up and take care of his kids. He needed work clothes, and he, through work release, he got a job at a recycling plant. But he needed some more heavy duty work clothes to be able, and so he reached out to the network, and the network said, great, we have a partner for that. And they went and pulled the network stakeholder, the partner. They went out, they figured out what he needed, took his sizes, everything, and then they went out and bought him everything that he needed, and then delivered that to him so that he had boots and, heavy jacket and the things that he needed to work in that recycling plant. Moving forward, again, needs always pop up so we're still in this journey, but at any point in time, Brandon can email the team And then the team can go to the wider stakeholder network to find who is the person that, knows about that. And so he always has those people to reach out to, and they're connected to all of these different resources. And so that has proven exceptionally helpful, because in my role here in the Archdiocese of Seattle and being the director of pastoral care, I get referrals all the time from individual people that are, looking for help for a loved one that's coming out, or whatever. And that's not something that I, in my own office at the Archdiocese, could take on by myself. But by virtue of having this special partnership, because the Archdiocese is one of those stakeholders, we're one of the reentry partners. But by being partnered with this entity, I now have this amazing menu of resources that I am now connected to by virtue of being one of the partners. And that allows me to serve people in a way that I never could otherwise. And it's why I have been so grateful to Joe over these last few years for us to be able to participate in that. Joe, there's another question about, does CPTS have picked? Yes.
Joe, make sure you mention, we also got him an assigned peer advisor.
Thank you. That's right.
He's not going to share with you or share with me some stuff that needs to be shared.
That's right. Thank you. I forgot about that. And yes, he did. And that peer advisor, that relationship between the two of them has really solidified. And so they get each other at a different level. And that has been really important and fruitful for him. Joe, there's a question about, does CPTS have paid case managers, or does it rely on volunteer peer advisors? What is the source of funding?
The CPTS is a private nonprofit, but what we do is that the partners are professionals. They are from the Washington State Department of Corrections, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, pretrial and probation, King County Corrections, Department of Social and Health Services, child support, public benefits, the federal VA, the King County VA, Veterans Assistance, Washington State Veterans Assistance, King County Veterans Assistance, a number of housing partners, faith-based ministers, pastors, Buddhist volunteers. I think the latest count that I did is that statewide, in any given month, most of the regional CPTSs meet on a Friday or Tuesday. And community colleges, universities as well. And then we have retired people who volunteer. We have Vincentians. We have people who are connected. I have one person who works for, who is a Rotarian, who's retired executive with the Catholic Community Services. And so the Rotarians are involved because of this Catholic who wants to stay involved with this population. So they come from a number of different backgrounds and livelihoods and ages and gender. We have 8 tribal governments engaged with us. They're very unique in how they do their work on and off the reservation. We're a very diverse community, so we have a number of Latino leaders, African American leaders, East African, West African, Muslim leaders, you name it. We make sure our table at any time can add another chair for another person. We insist that our network, our regional CPTSs, always have voices and faces of the men and women we serve at the table, and they're treated just like anybody else. And it gives us those voices and faces is the credibility. It puts in front of us why we choose to do this work. And so again, we have over 500 volunteers that come together once a month, and many of them weekly or daily, depending on the person who gets phone call or gets an email saying, oh, by the way, Brandon is being released from work release. He needs a place to live. Or Miss Molina has 2 kids and she just got released from the Women's Correctional Center, and she and her 2 kids have no place to live. She needs a job. Her 8-year-old son has autism, so he needs that special attention. Can you get him to therapy at Children's Hospital? So again, you can imagine it. The average person that begins a transition process with us, that completes that 1 to 3 year walk to build that bridge over that river called the Transition River, which is a very wide, turbulent river. To get to the other side to complete their reentry, the average takes 460 hours to complete that bridge over that 2-mile wide raging river. That's a lot of hours. That's a lot of people. Okay. So anybody that chooses to do this work by themselves is going to get frustrated and burned out, and they're not going to be around in 3 years. That's why it's healthy for all of us, COVID or not, to always work in that very special village that the Catholic Church has built for many, many, many years.
And then, Joe, you mentioned CPTS is its own nonprofit. Does it have its own paid staff, or is it
You're looking at
all
it.
volunteer
I'm the
run?
volunteer.
You're the volunteer.
I'm a volunteer because I work part-time as an employee of South Seattle College. But my other part-time work is I'm the co-facilitator of the King County CPTS. I'm also the chief of field operations, volunteer, for Washington CPTS. So I keep all the other ones connected to each other. And then I'm constantly connecting and recruiting volunteers to be part of this journey. So we raise our revenue base through a number of things. We sponsor workshops, we sponsor retreats, we sponsor a summer institute for the past 12 years, and we charge a fee for that. And that fee goes to 2 things. One, to support the event and to pay for the event. And secondly, to go into a fund to serve the men and women that have a need, a legitimate need. And of course, there's no paid staff at any of the CPTSs. We've kind of, I'll just give you an idea. King County CPTS, for it to do what it does, and we have a GoFundMe account too. So it takes about $25,000 to $30,000 a year to just sustain our body of work. But again, to write a check like we did yesterday for a woman who got a car donated to her when she got released from the Women's Correctional Center, but didn't have the gas. So we issued yesterday a check for a 3-month gas card, so she can get around for her appointments, reconnect with her kids, and also not only find a job but stay at the job. And we have volunteers who are with her for each one of those endeavors, never alone. But we don't build codependency. We work with people shoulder to shoulder. We walk behind them, but never in front of them. And we're constantly making sure we're building self-efficacy skills. That way, it's their voice, it's their face that needs to lead their lives. Just like Brandon, even though he's off state supervision, and even though he's had Joe in his corner and many others since the age of 16, Brandon knows that he's not walking alone, but Brandon knows he's responsible for his behavior every day.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the group about how the network works or?
Joe, we have a number of documents that we can share for those who wish for us to be shared. Just get your emails, your names, your contact numbers to Joe. He'll share them with me, and then I'll follow up and send whatever we're neck deep in a lot of research documents, a lot of body of work, how to work with county jails, how to work with state feds, how to work with each other. We call it a community formation process. That's how it's built. It's a process. A community needs to be formed because that, again, most of us have been taught and been very effective working linear, very narrow, top down. But it's very difficult to flip that and work horizontally and work with others and to find common ground and to build and sustain those kinds of relationships that it takes to give people that we serve a real sense of people do care. People do believe in second chance. How long have you been doing this work? I mean, I have to go back and say, look, St. Vincent de Paul started prison ministries in a dungeon jail in Paris. How many? 450 years ago? So there's been a lot of practice that we can relate to.
And Joe, can you talk just real quick before we wrap up? Someone asked about kind of frequency of meetings. I know you bring the stakeholders together, I think monthly, but can you talk about that structure that the stakeholders work to?
CPTS partners meet every Friday from 12:15 to 1:45. Very focused on an agenda, very focused on time, effort, minimizing redundancies. We're not a show and tell group. It's not for show and tell. It's for focusing on we just developed our second 3-year strategic plan. So we're very focused, very principled about what we do and who we work with. But again, the table's always ready to adjust and add another chair or two. So build a strategic plan. Now, we also have 4 work groups that are meeting, on their own, then come together on that third Friday to provide feedback to the General Assembly on the strategic plan in those 4 work groups that are meeting interdependently from the General Assembly, but are connected through the strategic plan. And so the other 8 regional networks, in fact, the Port Gamble tribal government just met on the 20th. So that was their first meeting, but we spent 3 years working with them to develop that potlatch tribal effort of, I think, about 6 or 7 tribes in Western Washington, smaller tribes. And so most of the 8 regional CPTSs are meeting monthly, at least monthly. We meet 10 months a year. We're off 2 months a year. And then they have work groups. And I think 4 are either have completed or are completing a strategic plan for their local regional efforts. And we can share those strategic plans, by the way. Everything's public documents, so we'll share everything that you ask for.
That's great. And some other members, there's some other great reentry ministries that Jared has thrown in here that are very related. Someone was talking about, they're in a rural area where they don't have a lot of resources and feel very alone. How can people get started in terms of bringing together, especially in places where there might not be as robust of stakeholder partners as we have in King County? but how would someone get started to try and, especially if they're feeling very isolated and alone in their reentry work?
Well, in 2012, we at King County CPTS, we had several visitors that came from the northwest region of our state, which is rural, Skagit, Whatcom, Highland County, and several that came from eastern Washington, which is very large area, but very rural and very Spanish speaking, very large Spanish speaking population. Mexican American, first generation, second, third generation Latino Mexican. So again, as an outcome of that, we created every 2 years, and by the way, Whatcom, Skagit, Island County in Northwest Washington, rural, they have their own CPTS now. Southwest Washington, which is basically rural, about 5 counties in Southwest Washington, they have their own regional CPTS. In Eastern Washington, we have one who's really gone crazy and done a great job in the last 3 years, and they cover 4 counties out of Wenatchee, Washington, and the Okanagan. And of course, they're linked with the largest reservation, Indian Nation in Washington, the Colville. And then in Yakima in Southeast, that's a brand new area that's opening up, being organized out of Walla Walla, Yakima, and the Tri-Cities in Central Washington. So again, that's the Yakima Nation, and some of the Spokane Nation, and again, knowing people who are leaders, who are already leaders in those areas, been working alone, many of them, and spending time. Sometimes I've spent, Kathy Wong and I have spent literally 3 or 4 years on the road, every 2 or 3 months, listening and supporting and going to organizing meetings and adding encouragement. And again, looking at parishes, looking at different faith-based organizations, evangelicals that have been involved in jail and prison ministries, bringing them together. So again, rural communities are very effective in getting things done neighbor to neighbor. Now it's a matter of just how you organize all those neighbors to work together.
Yeah. Well, we are. Thank you, Joe. We are at time, and so I do want to respect everybody's time. I want to thank all of you for joining with us today. Some of the documents that Joe is referencing, I believe, is already up on our website in the town hall section. But some of the other documents that Joe is talking about, we can get those out. Again, a recording of this will be available. But Joe, I just want to thank you, number one, for the work that you have done over all these years serving returning citizens and being there for them and organizing these communities of care. And then also for sharing with us today and just highlighting a little about the network and how it works. So to each of you, thank you for your daily commitment and work to this, to returning citizens, for everything that you're doing to care for them and to provide the same kind of care. We just so appreciate it. And please keep coming back, and we'll have our next reentry town hall will feature a program out of Los Angeles that is working specifically with returning women. And it's its own nonprofit in partnership with St. Vincent de Paul. Wonderful group, Susan Burton, founder of A New Way of Life, Father Perry Henry from St. Vincent de Paul in LA. It'll be May 20th at 10 Pacific, 12 Central, and 1 Eastern. And we just hope that you will join us. Everyone, thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much, and stay well.